Well, hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi, bringing you this special edition of top stories, rounding up your global news updates, be it climate, be it top developments, also updates from the conflict-ridden zones across the world, bringing you this special broadcast from our studios here in the national capital, styled exclusively by Paul Moll. Without further ado, in a tragic news coming in from Iran, Armita Geravand, the 16-year-old teenager who was harassed by the police for apparently violating the Islamic nation's strict hijab law, has passed away. On the 1st of October, Geravand suffered severe injuries after an altercation with the so-called Iranian morality police at the Shohada station in the Iranian capital city of Tehran. The incident was captured on CCTV and showed the sheer brutality with which Geravand was dragged off the train. Now, Geravand's parents, however, in a video had said that she had suffered a drop in blood pressure and lost her balance, due to which she hit her head on the platform. On the other hand, human rights groups allege that this statement was made under pressure from the Iranian authorities. And only last week, Geravand was pronounced brain dead and has now tragically succumbed to her injuries almost after a month. Now, Geravand's death has once again brought to the fore the strict Islamic laws enforced in Iran and enraged several human rights groups across the world. Iran has recently put its morality police back on the streets to enforce even stricter penalties for those flouting the required head covering. Geravand's death is also being linked to the death of Masa Amini, who had similarly been manhandled by the morality police and passed away in September last year.
CCTV footage from Tehran's metro on October 1st shows an unconscious person being dragged out from the cabin. Iran has denied that 16-year-old Armita Geravand was hurt after a confrontation with officers enforcing the mandatory Islamic dress code. Rights groups have been concerned that Geravand might face the same fate as Masa Amini, whose death last September in the custody of morality police sparked nationwide anti-government protests. Two journalists were handed long prison sentences on Sunday by an Iranian revolutionary court over their coverage of Amini's death, according to state media. Niloufar Hamidi and Elaha Mohammadi were sentenced to 13 and 12 years in prison, respectively. Their charges included collaboration with the U.S. government and acting against national security. Lawyers for the two journalists have rejected the charges.
Now, Armita Geravand's death has brought back to memory Masa Amini, another young lady who had died after being assaulted by Iran's morality police for allegedly violating the hijab law just last September. Amini was recently awarded the top human rights prize by the European Union. And Amini's death sparked major protests all across Iran as the women took to the streets without the head covering in defiance of the hijab law. Let's give you a timeline of the events. Last year in September, Amini was arrested by the Guidance Patrol for not wearing her hijab properly and violating the mandatory hijab law. On the 16th of September, Amini passed away after sustaining severe injuries whilst being in police custody. Protests broke out the very next day as several women took off their hijabs at Amini's funeral and raised slogans such as "Death to the Dictator" and quote-unquote "Women, Life and Freedom." Now, the protests quickly spread all across Iran with demands for an end to the Islamic regime. Several academics, intellectuals and other celebrities joined in the protests. The Iranian police clamped down heavily on the protesters and over 100 people were killed in the month of September itself. Many were arrested, many detained, and a few even executed in the following months. Now, under pressure, the Iranian government disbanded the morality police in December 2022. But with the protests fading out in the coming months, largely due to the heavy-handedness from the government, in July 2023, the morality police was back on the streets of Iran. And now, Amrita Geravand's death gives an account of how strict a vigil the morality police keeps. And moving on, With the Israel-Hamas conflict, with what many are saying might spill over, people are asking the question whether Lebanon can afford another war or not. With an economy in ruins and a crumbling state, Lebanon can ill afford another war between Hezbollah and Israel. Iran-backed Hezbollah knows this and is keeping Lebanon's crisis in mind as it plots the next steps in the conflict with Israel. As the war between Israel and Hezbollah's Palestinian ally Hamas reverberates across West Asia, the risk of war between Hezbollah and Israel remains higher than at any point since their last big conflict in 2006. Many say that the Shiite group could escalate if Hamas appears to be on the ropes in the Gaza Strip, while Lebanese leaders fear Israel could choose to instigate a major conflict with Hezbollah itself. But take a look at this. With Israel warning Hezbollah it would wreak devastation upon Lebanon, were the group to open the front, the costs of any war looms large in a country that is already suffering one of the most destabilizing phases since the 1975-1990 civil war. Hezbollah, according to international reportage, has no interest in a bigger war. With state coffers running empty, many also wonder who is going to finally pay to rebuild and reconstruct if a war does go on. Some question whether Sunni-led Gulf Arab states that had financed reconstruction in 2006, will they rush to help this time as well, given Hezbollah's bigger role in Lebanon? On the other hand, Israeli President Isaac Herzog has said Israel was not looking for a confrontation on its northern border, but, quote unquote, if Hezbollah drags us into war, it should be clear that Lebanon will pay the price. Now, the last several years have been particularly difficult for Lebanon, which has known little stability since independence and endured wars including Israeli invasions in the year 1978 and 1982. Decades of corruption and mismanagement by ruling politicians has led the financial system to completely collapse back in 2019, wiping out savings, demolishing the currency and fueling poverty. Now the state is barely functioning, whilst factional squabbling has left it without a president and a fully empowered government. Lebanon took years to rebuild from the 2006 war, which killed 1,200 people in Lebanon, mostly civilians, and about 158 Israelis, most of them being soldiers. 17 years later, Hezbollah's massively expanded arsenal has cemented a power balance in its favor, to the dismay of opponents who say the group is once again deciding matters of war and peace. Hezbollah would be thinking hard about how reconstruction would be financed after any war, with questions over whether Gulf Arab states would help and how much cash Iran could provide. Moving on to the Maine mass shooting, where police authorities in the United States state of Maine on Friday said that suspect in the Lewiston City mass shooting, Robert Card, has been found dead. As per initial reports, Card died due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A suicide note has also been recovered by the police. However, the note did not give any specific motive for the shooting. Now, this development comes 48 hours after the horrific mass shooting that left 18 people dead and 13 others injured. Just on Wednesday, Robert Card, who was a military reservist in the United States Army, opened fire inside a bowling alley and then went to a nearby bar, resulting in 18 deaths. The deceased in the horrific shooting ranged from age 14 to age 76.
So at 7:45 this evening is when Mr. Card was located. I won't give you an exact address. It was near the river along Androscoggin in Lisbon Falls was the actual location. That all remains to be seen, right? So our reality is that we found that body at 7:45 and it's 10:25 now. So there continues to be a lot of work that needs to be done here at the scene with the medical examiner's office.
Moving on. Russia conducted missile launches as a rehearsal for a massive retaliatory nuclear strike, aligning with the US stance on a test ban treaty. Moscow moved to revoke its ratification of the treaty amid tensions over Ukraine. President Putin's approval is pending. The move raises concerns about a potential arms race and further nuclear tests worldwide. Have a look at this next report.
Russia says these missile launches are part of a successful rehearsal for a massive retaliatory nuclear strike.
Уважаемые товарищи, добрый день.
That's how Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu characterized it to President Vladimir Putin in footage aired on Russian state TV. It's a show of force that coincides with Moscow moving quickly to revoke its ratification of a treaty banning nuclear tests. A de-ratification bill unanimously passed Russia's upper house of parliament on Wednesday. Putin will have the final sign-off. Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal and currently sees itself in an existential standoff with the West over Ukraine. Moscow says revoking the treaty's ratification will line it up with Washington's stance. The U.S. signed, but has never ratified the same document. If the United States continues to take no steps to fulfill its obligations, then this agreement will remain a sham. Upper House Speaker Valentina Matvienko told lawmakers. While the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty has never formally come into force, it has made nuclear testing taboo. Russia carries out exercises to test its so-called nuclear triad from time to time. The U.S. also carries out regular drills. Arms control experts say a test by either side could spark a new arms race and trigger more tests from other countries. Moscow says it has no plans to start testing unless Washington does it first.
And take a look at this. South Korea and the United States conducted joint future combat drills, including drones, unmanned vehicles, and wearable laser sensors to modernize their militaries. The training came as South Korea's military has been conducting a series of annual Hoguk autumn exercises aimed at improving responses to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. More than 120 soldiers from both sides joined forces to fight against a trained team of opposing forces. One 120 soldiers from both sides are taking part in this particular joint exercise. These joint exercises, they come at a training center in South Korea's military wing, and they're called the Hoguk autumn exercises that are aimed at improving responsiveness to the North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Meanwhile, international humanitarian agencies are defending casualty figures provided by Palestinian officials in Hamas-controlled Gaza after U.S. President Joe Biden cast doubt on the numbers. Take a look at this next report.
International humanitarian agencies are defending casualty figures provided by Palestinian officials in Hamas-controlled Gaza after U.S. President Joe Biden cast doubt on the numbers. There's no dispute that Israeli attacks on Gaza have killed many people since Hamas launched their own attack in southern Israel on October 7th. But Biden said on Wednesday he had, quote, no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using, without saying why. Omar Shakir is the Israel and Palestine director for Human Rights Watch, one of the humanitarian agencies defending the figures.
When we've done independent investigations that verify death tolls for particular strikes, our numbers have always been generally consistent with what the Ministry of Health in Gaza has put out, with no major discrepancies.
Gaza's health ministry responded with the release of a 212-page document. It contains the names and identity numbers of around 7,000 Palestinians said to have been killed in the Israeli bombardment of the enclave. Israel has not provided its own estimated death toll. The UN and other international agencies say there can be small discrepancies between the final casualty numbers and those reported by Gaza's authorities in the immediate aftermath of attacks. However, they consider them broadly accurate. Shakir said agencies, including the UN and the U.S. State Department, had previously cited the Gazan Health Ministry's figures.
This creates a fog of war, a fog of misinformation, which can provide political cover for more large-scale atrocities to take place. The conversation should focus on how world leaders can stop further mass atrocities and not nitpicking whether a number that's generally proven to be accurate may be a little bit off.
Calculating death tolls is a difficult task. Palestinian officials reported difficulty in identifying and counting victims after some attacks because of dismemberment. On Friday, a World Health Organization official said the agency had received estimates that some 1,000 unidentified bodies were still buried under the rubble in Gaza, but did not reveal the source. Those figures were not yet included in death tolls.
Well, a humanitarian crisis that's coming up next, albeit of a different kind. With the homeless population estimated to be at 75,000, some 14,000 unhoused Los Angeles County residents are resorting to living in their vehicles as an alternative to sleeping rough on the streets. The city of Los Angeles is trying to clamp down on this.
Colleen McGee and Alexander Spector live in this RV parked in Burbank, California with their dog Mimo. The quarters are tight, but they say it's a step up.
I became homeless because I couldn't afford my rent, and I ended up living in tents or bushes or whatever. Then I got into an RV, and that's more like a home kind of thing. At least there was shelter.
Through circumstances of my own, I was on the streets for a while, and living on the streets is awful. And so over time, you make little moves and you talk to people, and opportunities arise, and sometimes you have the opportunity to move into one of these.
They have lived here for 2 years and are part of a growing trend. 14,000 of the estimated 75,000 homeless Los Angeles County residents are living in their vehicles.
The scale of the problem is just immense. All of our major corridors are choked with RVs and vans that have been parked in many cases for months or years.
Los Angeles City Councilwoman Tracy Park introduced a measure to regulate the sale of RVs and vans that are used for housing. It was unanimously approved by the council at the end of August. Now LA County is considering something similar.
The new ordinance would require the sale or lease of an RV here in the city of Los Angeles to comply with all other state and federal laws, including that the operator have a valid driver's license, that it meet basic operability standards, as well as things like fire and environmental standards.
The ordinance has no impact on people living in RVs now, but even if governments tried to pass laws affecting them, they say they don't think it would work.
They're never going to disappear. They can't tow all of them, and so they're just going to go somewhere else. And if they try to make it illegal to live in a van out here, then people are going to do it anyways.
Nearly a third of Californians are living in or near poverty, with poverty in Los Angeles County the highest in the state, according to the Public Policy Institute of California.
Well, now, California's Department of Motor Vehicles suspended General Motors' self-driving car company, Cruise, ordering its robo-taxis off the road in San Francisco because they posed a quote-unquote unreasonable risk to public safety.
California's Department of Motor Vehicles suspended GM's self-driving car company Cruise on Tuesday, ordering its robo-taxis off the road in San Francisco because they posed a, quote, unreasonable risks to public safety. That's according to a statement from the state's DMV that said Cruise had misrepresented information related to the safety of its autonomous technology. The suspension, effective immediately, is a major setback for General Motors and comes after a series of accidents involving Cruise vehicles. Cruise said the DMV reviewed an incident on October 2nd when one of its self-driving vehicles was putting on the brakes, but did not avoid striking a pedestrian who had previously been struck by a hit-and-run driver. Cruise said that in that incident, a human driver, quote, tragically struck and propelled the pedestrian into the path of the autonomous vehicle, which struck the pedestrian. GM CEO Mary Barra, who has previously said Cruise represents a giant growth opportunity, said its robotaxis have better safety records than human drivers. Shares of GM ended more than 2% lower on Tuesday.
And now let me tell you something about art and artificial intelligence. A Canadian artist is experimenting with AI to create art. Let's see how this fusion is really working out.
Rapidly emerging technology under the umbrella term AI seems to be changing a number of fields, from transportation to brain surgery. Proponents say it could make our lives safer or more efficient. But what about the arts, where working faster or better isn't always the point, and where an artist's greatest asset is often their uniquely human touch? Artist and researcher Songwen Chung believes that there is room for innovation in the studio as well. She says she's pushing the boundaries of creative work alongside AI.
I've worked with computer vision and public cameras to think about ways drawing can expand and how the mark made by hand can shape and be shaped by the mark made by machine.
Chung was born in Hong Kong and brought up in Toronto by an opera-singing father and a mother who programmed computers. Now she collaborates with a variety of painting robots, sometimes in front of live audiences. The artwork they create together can sell for as much as tens of thousands of pounds. The machines are named DUG, Drawing Operations Unit Generation. They study the artist's hand-drawn gestures and synchronously draw along.
What I love about the project is it's not really one of control or repetition or sequencing. There is an overhead camera in the work that reads my gestures in space when I'm making the work. There's a neural network that drives, in one of the generations, there's a neural network that's trained on 2 decades of my own drawing data that responds to the mark I make on the canvas. It really creates an embodied linkage between myself and the robotic system that isn't pre-sequenced, that isn't sort of pre-controlled, and I think in that way we're able, the system, the robotic units, myself, are able to respond in order to make an image. So it's I like to think of it as a kind of embodied AI system that reads myself in the space as one of the prime collaborators.
By taking robotic arms, typically associated with manufacturing of cars or microchips, and repurposing them in a creative space, Chung says she aims to challenge people's ideas about the limits of robotics and AI.
Obviously, the arm is quite interesting, as I think it has a presence in culture as an icon of industrial automation, and I'm repurposing that iconography in a way, that motif, for being a presence that is collaborative and improvisational and meant for making artworks.
Chung is regarded as a pioneer of human and machine collaboration and has been showcased around the world. She was named as one of the 100 most influential people in AI on the inaugural Time 100 AI list for 2023 under the Innovator category.
Well, now take a look at this next one. In the heart of Bangkok, this Thai cafe isn't clowning around when it comes to Halloween. The cafe offers a range of themed treats, including beverages like unicorn blood and a featured brain cake as well. Now, what sets this cafe apart is its staff, who dress up as spooky characters like clowns, witches, and wizards. Customers also join in the fun by wearing their favorite Halloween costumes. Now, despite the macabre appearance of the dishes and the drinks, customers find them surprisingly tasty. This cafe offers a unique Halloween dining experience for those looking to celebrate the season with a spooky twist.
ก็คือตัวนี้จะเสิร์ฟอยู่บนหัวกะโหลกเลยทำให้รู้สึกแบบว่าได้ทานบนชั่วดีอยู่ในกะโหลกมา1 2 3
ตัวเราเข้าฝั่งนู้นกันเถอะ คือตัวนี้คือไอ้ตัวนี้เนี่ยไม่ตก
Well, an experience like none other for sure. But talking about consumer-centric stories, take a look at this next one. Tata Group is all set to manufacture Apple iPhones in India. The Minister for Information and Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, informed the same via his social media. According to the statement shared by the minister, the Taiwan-based iPhone manufacturer, Wistron Infocom, has approved the domestic and global sales of its Indian manufacturing units to Tata Group for an estimated $125 million. Moving on, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon is selling some of his stock in the bank for the first time in his 18 years at the helm. That's according to the company on Friday, which said the share sale would take place next year. The billionaire banker and his family intend to sell 1 million of the 8.6 million shares they own, according to a regulatory filing.
Trade. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon is selling some of his stock in the bank for the first time in his 18 years at the helm. That's according to the company on Friday, which said the share sale would take place next year. The billionaire banker and his family intend to sell 1 million of the 8.6 million shares they own, according to a regulatory filing. The sale would fetch $141 million and leave them with more than $1 billion in stock based on Thursday's closing price. It will account for less than 10% of Dimon's holdings, which also includes stock options and other shares that haven't vested. Investors sometimes view top executives selling shares as a bad sign. JP Morgan said Dimon is selling the stock for financial diversification and tax planning purposes, and that he continues to believe the company's prospects are very strong. A management consultant focused on capital markets told Reuters the sale makes perfect sense, but pointed out Dimon has become more negative and quite bearish in his rhetoric, so the sale doesn't look good. Shares of JP Morgan Chase fell 2% in morning trading.
Meanwhile, the United States economy defied recession warnings, growing at its fastest pace in nearly 2 years, as per the Commerce Department's report. GDP surged by 4.9% in Q3, surpassing the 4.3% forecast. Strong consumer spending and a rebound in residential investment has fueled this particular growth. However, factors like labor strikes and student loan repayments may slow growth in Q4.
The U.S. economy grew at its fastest pace in nearly 2 years in the third quarter, once again defying dire warnings of a recession. That's according to the Commerce Department's advance estimate on Thursday. Gross domestic product increased at an annualized rate of 4.9% last quarter, blowing past the 4.3% GDP estimate forecast by economists polled by Reuters. Robust consumer spending fueled growth amid a resilient labor market, with businesses restocking warehouses and store shelves to meet strong demand. Consumer spending accounts for more than 2/3 of U.S. economic activity. The economy was also spurred by a rebound in residential investment after 9 straight quarterly declines. While the strong GDP pace is likely not sustainable, it showcased the economy's stamina despite aggressive interest rate hikes from the Federal Reserve to tame inflation. But growth could slow in the fourth quarter due to several factors, including the United Auto Workers strikes and the resumption of student loan repayments for millions of Americans.
Now, Mercedes-Benz warns of a challenging electric vehicle market, citing intense price competition and supply chain issues. Despite a nearly 7% drop in pre-tax earnings to $5 billion in Q3, the company refrained from reducing prices. Chief Financial Officer Harold Wilhelm emphasized the industry's need for change. Shares fell 5% in response. Other car makers like Ford and Tesla have also cut prices this year to boost demand.
Mercedes-Benz says the market for electric vehicles is getting brutal, and it warns that could bite into profit margins over the coming months. The luxury car maker on Thursday posted a near 7% drop in pre-tax earnings. They sank to just over $5 billion in the third quarter. Mercedes said fierce price competition and supply chain issues were making the EV market a tough battle. The company says some rivals are selling electric cars for less than traditionally powered models, even though they cost more to make. Chief Financial Officer Harold Wilhelm said the status quo could not be sustainable for the industry. Mercedes shares fell around 5% in early trade following the warning. Car makers from Ford to Tesla have been slashing prices this year in a bid to prop up demand. Mercedes has largely refrained from following suit, but says inflation and other factors weighed on earnings over recent months. That echoes comments earlier in the week from Porsche, which said the luxury sector wouldn't be immune to global economic worries. On a more positive note, Mercedes said the industry was beyond the worst on inflation and energy costs.
And Unilever's new CEO, Heinz Schumacher, aims to revitalize the company after admitting recent underperformance. The focus is on simplifying the business, improving gross margins, and concentrating on 30 key brands. Unilever met sales expectations by raising prices more slowly. Schumacher took over from former CEO Alan Jope amid industry challenges from rising costs and changing consumer preferences.
Unilever's new CEO aims to make a big impact quickly. On Thursday, Heinz Schumacher laid out plans to simplify the business and deliver faster growth. He did so while admitting the consumer goods giant had underperformed in recent years. Schumacher said the quality of its growth, productivity and returns had all underdelivered. He said Unilever would now focus on improving its gross margin and not undertake any major acquisitions. The maker of Dove soap and Ben & Jerry's ice cream met market expectations for third quarter sales growth. Unilever reported a 5.2% rise in underlying sales, meeting analysts' average forecasts. It achieved this by raising prices at a slower rate. But the company failed to win back some shoppers who turned to cheaper products during a cost of living crisis. Schumacher said the company would now focus on 30 key brands which account for 70% of its sales. He replaced previous CEO Alan Jope, who had a difficult final year at Unilever. The consumer goods industry has also struggled for more than 2 years due to soaring costs.
And moving on, Hyundai's Q3 profits soared by 151% to nearly $2.4 billion, driven by strong demand for SUVs amid chip shortages. Now, favorable exchange rates and high SUV prices boosted earnings. However, industry momentum might slow down due to higher interest rates and economic uncertainty. General Motors delayed some electric vehicle launches to prioritize profits over sales targets.
SUVs are driving a surge in earnings at Hyundai Motor. The South Korean giant said Thursday that profits jumped 151% over the third quarter. They hit almost $2.4 billion, easily beating analyst forecasts. The year has seen Hyundai production slowly recover from the global shortage of computer chips. But output has failed to keep up with demand, meaning prices have stayed high. That boosted margins on premium vehicles like big SUVs. The company also got a lift from favourable exchange rates. But analysts say there are signs that momentum is now slowing for the industry. High interest rates have raised financing costs for consumers, and an uncertain economic outlook has sapped demand. Earlier this week, General Motors said it was pushing back the launch of some new electric vehicles in a bid to cut costs. The US firm said driving profits was more important than pursuing sales targets.
Well, shifting our focus from consumer-centric stories to global climate stories. We've got a lot to talk about. We'll bring you an aftermath of Hurricane Otis. We'll talk about the Queensland bushfires. We'll also bring you an update of what the AQI looks like here in the national capital. The air quality in the national capital of Delhi continues to remain in the poor category, with the air quality index on Saturday morning being recorded at 286. In the adjoining Noida, the AQI stood at 255, with the quality remaining in the poor category as well. In Gurugram, the air quality was slightly better, with the AQI in the moderate category. And to tackle the increasingly worsening air quality, Delhi has put under the second phase of the Graded Response Action Plan. Additionally, the Delhi government's Red Light On, Gadi Off campaign was implemented on the 26th of October. So Delhi and Noida AQI index in the poor category, whereas Gurugram just slightly better than the rest. And if that wasn't all the trouble, a UN report has warned that India may be heading towards a groundwater depletion tipping point. Now, the Interconnected Disaster Risks Report 2023, it has found that 27 of the world's 31 major aquifers are depleting faster than they can be replenished. India is the world's largest user of groundwater, exceeding the use of the United States and China combined. The northwestern region of India serves as the breadbasket for the nation's growing 1.4 billion people, with the states of Punjab and Haryana producing 50% of the country's rice supply and 85% of its wheat stocks. However, 78% of wells in Punjab are considered overexploited, and the northwestern region as a whole is predicted to experience critically low groundwater availability by the year 2025. The tipping point in this case is reached when the water table falls below a level that existing wells can access. Once crossed, farmers will no longer have access to groundwater to irrigate their crops. This not only puts farmers at risk of losing their livelihood, but can also lead to food insecurity and put entire food production systems at risk of failure. Shifting our focus to Australia, where authorities have today urged thousands of people in Australia's Queensland to evacuate as bushfires have destroyed at least 30 homes already and continue to threaten rural towns. More than 35 bushfires were burning on Saturday in Queensland, with the town of Tara about 890 kilometers north of the state capital, Brisbane, among areas most at risk, according to the fire authorities. And take a look at this. Hurricane Otis has wreaked havoc in southern Mexico, with at least 27 people reported dead and 4 missing in the southern state of Guerrero. The Category 5 hurricane has now weakened into a storm, but this is not the hurricane left behind a massive trail of destruction. In Acapulco, people are struggling. Houses are damaged, power is out, and there is not enough help from the authorities. It's a tough situation, and authorities say recovery will take a long time.
Hurricane Otis barreled into Acapulco, Mexico as a Category 5 storm early on Wednesday. The Mexican beach resort was pummeled with torrential rain and fierce winds, reaching 165 miles per hour, battering hotels and sending tourists running for cover. Otis is one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit the region. After reaching the shore as a Category 5, it quickly weakened to a Category 4 storm. Its power slackened further as it moved inland, reducing to a tropical storm. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador said there were no immediate reports of fatalities from the storm, but he cautioned that authorities were struggling to obtain updates and said there were landslides and damage on the roads. Power outages have been reported throughout the region, affecting hundreds of thousands.
And in West Asia, using large drones and millions of seeds, UAE's energy company, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, is hoping to accelerate its forestation program in Abu Dhabi. The UAE aims to work on reaching its 2030 target of planting 10 million mangrove seedlings.
Using large drones and millions of seeds, an Abu Dhabi energy company is hoping to speed up its forestation program. As part of its ambitious fight against climate change, the UAE plans to plant 10 million mangrove seedlings by 2030. The Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, or ADNOC, is working alongside UAE-based environmental tech company Distant Imagery. Using drone planting technology adopted by the Abu Dhabi Environment Agency, they began planting 2.5 million mangrove seedlings. Ibrahim Al-Zubi is the Group Chief Sustainability Officer at ADNOC.
With the drones, we managed to survey areas that we couldn't reach. We managed to survey areas that we knew we could put mangroves there and we did not know before. We reduced the human error. We lowered cost, but most importantly as well, we found out that the success rates using drones is almost the same as success rates using conventional, traditional planting, which will take more time and effort and funds as well.
However, only 40% of the planted seeds survive and grow into seedlings, according to the co-owner of Distant Imagery, Jane Glavan.
So we have a 40% success rate, 40 to 44% success rate. And really what happens so that ADNOC can successfully have 2.5 million seedlings growing is that we replenish the following year. So we take that data from the first year and then we go back to the field and we replenish in the areas that were most successful. And from that we go out and monitor 2 more times.
According to the UN Environment Programme, global mangrove forests in 2020 had declined by 3.4% since 1966. But stabilised in recent years. In the Gulf country, the number of mangroves has reached 60 million over 70 square miles. The UN also said the success rate of artificial mangrove restoration projects can be quite low. Older mangroves store more carbon than newer ones. But the Climate Ministry in the Gulf country said the mangroves capture 43,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide annually.
So we really plant in following the focus, trying to replicate nature as close as possible. And by replicating nature as close as possible, you have these natural forest stands after the years that they grow.
Next up, bringing you a quick roundup of political and domestic stories back at home. All of this in the run-up to the 2024 final mandate, the general elections. Mizoram, one of those poll-bound states where the Bharatiya Janata Party has released its manifesto for the upcoming assembly elections. One of the major focus of the Bharatiya Janata Party's manifesto seems to be women empowerment. The party has come out with several promises in this very regard. There is a promise of 33% reservation for women in government jobs in the state. Apart from this, the manifesto also proposes free education to all girl students and a cumulative financial assistance of rupees 1.5 lakh to every girl child. The elections in Mizoram are all set to take place on the 7th of November, whilst the counting will take place on the 3rd of December. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Top Stories. Lots more coming right on the other side. Don't go anywhere.
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video